9 years in prison taught him how to survive. But freedom, that was the real test. When Reuben King walked out of those gates with nothing but a name people hated and a dream no one believed in, he knew one thing. This time, he'd either build something clean or die trying. The bus hissed to a stop on the edge of Hattiesburg, Mississippi, depositing a single man onto the cracked sidewalk. He carried no luggage, just a manila envelope and a folded-up pair of gray sweatpants tied to his belt. His name was Reuben King, and he'd spent the last 9 years inside Parchman Farm, the kind of prison where you either learn how to rot or how to survive. Reuben survived. The summer air was thick, smelled like pine tar and diesel. Reuben blinked against the heat as if the sun itself were judging him. 43 years old, one bad deal that turned into a gunfight, one sentence for attempted manslaughter and trafficking, one mother who'd stopped answering his letters 5 years in, and not a single friend waiting at the curb. He walked. His shoes, stay-tissued and 2 sizes too big, slapped the pavement like insults. Every step brought him closer to a town he once knew well, and that knew him even better, or thought it did. Reuben wasn't here to make apologies. He'd done that already to every wall and ceiling inside that cell. He wasn't here to hide either. That time was over. He had a plan, absurd as it sounded. He was going to start a business, a legal one. He made his way to a used car lot owned by a cousin he hadn't spoken to since 8. The sign read, King Auto and Salvage, honest deals, no games. Reuben stood outside the gate until a man in greasy overalls stepped out of the prefab office. Troy King, half-brother, full skeptic. "Damn, thought you were dead," Troy muttered, lighting a cigarette. "Didn't expect you to show up looking like a ghost in hand-me-downs." "I need a job," Reuben said plainly. "Not charity, just a shot." Troy looked him over, then spit into the dirt. "You gonna bring heat to my doorstep?" "No," Reuben said, "only hustle." Troy chuckled. "Tell you what, I'll give you the graveyard shift. Strip parts off junkers, clean up grease traps. No customers, no drama." Reuben nodded. It was something, and more than he'd dared hope for. By month's end, he'd saved just under $400. He barely ate, slept on a cot in the back of the office, and kept a battered notebook with sketches and figures. Reuben wasn't just passing time, he was building something in his mind piece by piece. A mobile auto detailing business. No fixed shop, no rent. Just him, a power washer, and a van. But the town hadn't forgotten him. At the gas station he heard the whispers. "That's Reuben King, prison boy." One afternoon, after detailing a neighbor, busted Camry for $20, he returned to the lot and found the word Felon keyed into the hood of his own rusted truck. He didn't flinch. Instead, he picked up a rag, buffed it out as best he could, then opened his notebook and circled a date, 3 weeks from now, in red ink. He was going to buy his first van, even if it meant working 20-hour days. Reuben found the van on Craigslist. A 1999 Ford Econoline with 210,000 miles, paint peeling like dead skin, and a busted rear door that wouldn't close unless you kicked it twice. It was perfect. The seller, a man with a faded marine tattoo and 3 teeth, wanted $1,600. Reuben offered $1,100 cash. The man eyed him sideways. "You robbed somebody." Reuben didn't smile. "I cleaned cars, 17 of them." The guy stared a moment, then nodded. "Respect." Reuben drove the van off the lot with one eye on the side mirror. Not for cops, but for ghosts. He parked it behind the auto yard and got to work. By day, he stripped radiators and rotated tires. By night, he converted the van, mounted a water tank, fitted shelves, bought a used pressure washer from a pawn shop in Biloxi. A friend of Troy's welded a steel rack for the soaps and hoses. Reuben named the business Second Chance Shine and painted it himself in bold white letters along the van's sides. The first week, nothing. He handed out flyers, stood in grocery store parking lots, pitched his service to soccer moms and retired veterans with dusty Buicks. No one called. The second week he got 2 jobs, a funeral home's fleet of black sedans and a guy who wanted his muddy Jeep cleaned like new. Reuben worked 6 hours straight, made $80 and didn't take a break. When the man handed him the cash, Reuben looked him in the eye and said, "I appreciate the trust." The man shrugged. "You do good work, that's all I care about." It was a crack in the wall. Word started to spread, not fast but honest. Reuben's hands didn't shake. He worked like he was cleaning away years, not grime. People noticed. But not everyone appreciated the change. One afternoon, Reuben returned from a job and found Troy standing beside the van, arms crossed. The rear tires had been slashed, paint thinner dumped across the hood. The words "Go back to jail" scrawled across the windshield in white spray paint. Troy didn't say anything at first, just lit a cigarette and handed Reuben a rag. "You gonna tell the cops?" he asked. "No." "Why not?" "Because they already think I'm trouble," Reuben said. "No sense proving them right." Troy looked at him for a long time. "You're serious about this, huh?" Reuben nodded. "Every job I do makes me less of who I was." Troy exhaled smoke. "That's the saddest, truest thing I ever heard." Reuben fixed the tires himself, painted over the damage, kept going. But the attacks didn't stop. Rumors started that Reuben was using the van to run drugs again, that he was paying kids to fake business reviews online. Anonymous calls to the city inspector delayed his business license for weeks. The final blow came when he landed a commercial contract, 5 service vehicles at a local construction company. It would have doubled his income. 2 days later, they canceled. "We didn't know about your past," the manager said over the phone, voice tight. "Sorry, we just can't take that kind of risk." Reuben stood there, phone silent in his hand, watching a summer storm roll in from the north. He could feel it happening, the pull of old instincts, the part of him that wanted to grab someone, demand an explanation. But that part had no future. Instead, he sat in the van and listened to the rain, for hours, until it stopped. That night he drove to a neighborhood he hadn't seen since before prison. A girl named Tasha lived there, or used to. She had once believed in him, before he shattered that belief with a .38 and a raid that ended in cuffs and blood. He didn't knock, just parked outside her place and watched the lights through the window. A boy, maybe 10, ran past in pajamas. Reuben stared at the kid and whispered to no one, "That won't be me, not ever again." Then he drove off with a business still bleeding, but a fire still burning. The next morning, Reuben started over like nothing had happened. He replaced the slashed tires again, buffed out the paint, repainted the letters on the side of the van, this time in bright silver. Second chance shine. Let them see it even when they squinted. But the silence was worse than the vandalism. For 10 days, his phone didn't ring once. The van sat idle like a forgotten promise, and the bank account trickled toward zero. Troy noticed. One afternoon he tossed Reuben a half sandwich from the shop fridge and said, "You need help, man, not pride." Reuben shook his head. "I got a plan." Troy scoffed. "You always got a plan. Problem is, no one's buying what you're selling." "I'm not selling my past." "No, but you're still paying for it." That night Reuben drove the van to the edge of town, a trailer park out by the old mill road. A rough place, full of noise and broken windows and people who didn't ask questions. Reuben had lived there once. That's where he found Lonnie. Lonnie McDade was the kind of man who never left the game. Mid-50s, gut like a sack of laundry, gold tooth flashing under cigarette smoke. He ran numbers, pills, and small-time favors for the desperate. Back in the day, he and Reuben had pulled some ugly jobs together. "Reuben King," Lonnie said, stepping onto his porch with a slow grin. "You look like a preacher who lost his Bible." Reuben didn't smile. "I need work." Lonnie cocked his head. "Legal work." "Yeah." Lonnie laughed hard, nearly dropped his beer. "You sure picked the wrong porch, brother." Reuben hesitated, his fists clenched, his tongue felt heavy. It would have been so easy to say yes to something quick and dirty. A bag here, a car there, fast cash. No questions. But then he thought of that kid in the window at Tasha's place. "I ain't that man anymore," he said, turning to leave. Lonnie's voice followed him down the steps. "Then you better learn how to beg, 'cause clean don't pay around here." That night Reuben parked in the empty Walmart lot, opened his notebook and started writing names. He wasn't going back, not for anyone. The next morning he woke early and began offering free cleanings. Church vans, old folks' sedans, kids' bikes, no charge, just hustle. When asked why, he said, "Because my name needs to mean something before my price does." By week's end, his van was booked. Donations started coming in. A widow tipped him $50 for washing her husband's dusty Buick. A pastor gave him a hot meal and promised to mention him in Sunday's sermon. The tide shifted slowly, like a river changing course. But then one morning, he found a man waiting beside his van. Dressed in black, lean, cold-eyed, not a cop, but dangerous in a different way. "You made some folks nervous," the man said. "Lonnie, for one. I told Lonnie I was out. He doesn't believe you, thinks you're playing some long con, building a business to launder money." "That ain't true." The man stepped closer. "Doesn't matter, perception's what kills, not facts." Reuben said nothing. The man handed him a burner phone. "You'll get a call in 3 days. Don't answer, and this van won't see another sunrise." Reuben stared at the phone like it was made of glass and venom. His heart thudded like a jackhammer. After the man left, Reuben drove to the edge of a cotton field, stepped out, and flung the phone into the tall grass. He knew what was coming, but he also knew what he had to do. That evening, he went to the sheriff's office. He told them everything. Not because he trusted them, not because he wanted to be saved, but because the next time someone tried to bury him, they'd have to do it in broad daylight. The sheriff listened in silence. His name was Jack Edmond, a stoic man with steel-gray eyes and a reputation for being fair, but not friendly. "You got any proof of this?" he asked after Reuben finished. "No," Reuben admitted, "but if anything happens to me or my business, you'll know where to look." Sheriff Edmond leaned back in his chair. "You know what you're doing, King. Trying not to be the man I used to be. That might not be enough, not in this county." Reuben stood. "It'll have to be." He left the station with a strange calm, the kind that comes when you've finally burned the last bridge behind you. No way back, only through. The next night someone threw a brick through the van's windshield. Not spray paint, not slashed tires, this was louder, bolder, a message. Troy helped him tow it into the garage bay. They replaced the glass in silence. "You sure you still want to play this game?" Troy asked. "It's not a game." Troy looked at him like he wasn't sure whether to respect him or mourn him. "Then, I hope you're ready for war." What came next wasn't a shootout or a chase. It was something slower, more insidious. Inspections, audits. Suddenly, the city required a new permit for mobile pressure washers. Insurance claims got lost. Social media pages were flooded with one-star reviews from fake accounts calling him a fraud, drug mule, liar. He worked harder. When bookings dried up again, he knocked on doors in the heat, sweat soaking his collar. He cleaned school buses for half rate. He washed lawn equipment and wheelchairs. Every dollar he earned felt like a punch thrown against a shadow. And yet things started to turn. A woman named Gloria, a retired teacher who'd lost her husband to a heart attack, called him to clean her rusting Chrysler. Reuben noticed her porch was collapsing, so after he washed the car, he used his remaining wood scraps to fix the railing. For free. She made him lemonade, told everyone in her neighborhood about him. 3 jobs came from that, then 6, then 20. At a local flea market, a barber named Darius offered to set up a shine station next to his booth every weekend. "You get M sparkling," Darius said, "and I'll fade their edges, make M feel new." Reuben smiled for the first time in weeks. But just when it seemed like he might make it through the fire, it hit, like a hammer from the past. Tasha showed up. He was detailing a church van when he saw her standing across the parking lot, arms folded, eyes unreadable. He froze. She approached slowly, her son, a lanky boy with sharp eyes, walking behind her. "I heard you got yourself a business," she said, voice flat. "I'm trying," Reuben replied, wiping his hands on a rag. "It's not easy." She studied him a long time. "You left me to pick up the pieces. 9 years, Reuben. I know. You don't know nothing. She took out a small envelope and pressed it into his hand. For Elijah, she said, nodding toward the boy. He's yours. The breath left him. I never told the courts, never asked for $1, she continued. But he wants to meet you, said he deserves to know the man you are now, not the one I remember. Elijah stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, eyes darting between them. Reuben turned toward him. You okay with that, son? I don't know, the boy said, but I'm here, ain't I? Reuben's hands shook, not from fear, from the crushing weight of what a second chance really meant. He looked at Tasha. I don't expect forgiveness. Good, she said. It's not yours to expect. But she didn't walk away. Neither did Elijah. For the first time in years, Reuben King saw a future that had nothing to do with redemption or revenge, but with responsibility. And maybe love. Reuben didn't sleep that night. Not from fear. He'd learned to live with that like a second skin, but from something heavier. Hope. A boy, his boy, Elijah, 10 years old with Tasha's wary eyes and his own clenched jaw. The kid hadn't said much, but he hadn't turned away either. And that meant the world. Over the next 2 weeks, they met in slow, careful steps, an hour at the park, lunch at a burger joint. One Saturday, Reuben showed him how to wash a car properly. It's about the details, he said, guiding Elijah's hand across the soap-slick hood. People don't trust clean if you skip corners. Elijah nodded, serious as a judge. Tasha watched from the driver's seat. She hadn't softened, but she hadn't stopped them either. Still, there was danger in this new closeness. Reuben could feel it in his bones, like a storm behind the mountains just out of sight. Lonnie hadn't forgotten. Neither had the man in black. One morning, Reuben found his storage unit broken into. Nothing stolen, just everything trashed. Soaps poured out, wires cut, equipment smashed. It was personal, and it was a warning. Reuben stood inside the wreckage, hands on his knees, breathing through his teeth. He'd gone to the cops already. That door was closed. Now he had to decide, protect the business or protect the boy. That afternoon, he drove to the trailer park again. This time, he didn't go quietly. Lonnie opened the door mid-yell, arguing with someone on the phone. When he saw Reuben, his smile died. You got a death wish coming here, Lonnie muttered. You think I'm afraid of you, Reuben said, stepping forward. No, Lonnie said. I think you forgot who you are. Reuben stared him down. No, I remember too well, that's why I'm here. This stops now. Lonnie chuckled. You gonna threaten me with soap and water? Reuben pulled a folded photo from his back pocket. Elijah, holding a sponge, grinning. I'm not the one you hurt, Reuben said. You mess with my son and I'll stop playing church. I swear to God. Lonnie squinted. Tasha told you. She didn't have to. He told me himself. Lonnie stepped forward, his voice low and cold. You think that kid makes you clean. You think blood don't stain because you opened an LLC. No, Reuben said, but it gives me something to lose, which means I'll fight twice as hard. They stood there, two ghosts in the sunlight, until Lonnie finally stepped back. I'm done with you, he said, but that don't mean others are. Reuben nodded. Then let them come, I'll still be standing. He turned and walked away. By the time he reached the van, his hands were trembling. He lit a cigarette, a habit he hadn't touched in 9 years, and smoked it down to the filter. That night he couldn't bring himself to visit Elijah. He was ashamed, not of what he'd said, but of what he'd almost become again. Instead, he drove to the church lot and started washing his own van. Midnight passed. The water ran black. Soap suds clung to his arms like ghosts. He scrubbed until the skin on his hands blistered. Until the stars faded. Until he could look at himself in the reflection of the van door and believe, just barely, that he still deserved this chance. In the morning, Troy found him asleep in the driver's seat. You look like hell, he muttered. Reuben opened his eyes. Feels about right. Troy handed him a piece of paper. Client called, big one, city utility fleet, said they want a full detailing every month. Reuben blinked. They know who I am. They said they don't care who you were, only care how clean their trucks are. Reuben laughed once quietly. Maybe it's working, he whispered. Or maybe, Troy said, people are finally seeing what I've seen since you got out. What's that? Troy looked at him for a long time. That the dirtiest man in this town is the only one honest enough to get his hands clean. The city contract changed everything. 12 municipal vehicles, garbage trucks, work vans, sedans used by the zoning office, all scheduled monthly. Steady income. Reuben hired 2 part-time kids from the neighborhood, paid them above minimum wage, taught them how to detail with precision, told them, don't just wash, restore. People feel different when things shine. The van got an upgrade. He added a water reclamation system, new signage, matching uniforms. The business grew street by street. But so did the pressure. Elijah had started coming around more often. He asked questions about engines, about prison, about manhood. Reuben answered carefully, truthfully. One day, after finishing a job together, Elijah asked, "Did you kill somebody?" Reuben froze. "I need to know," the boy added, quiet but firm. Reuben looked him in the eye. "No, I hurt someone bad, but he lived." "Did you mean to?" Reuben swallowed. "I was scared, angry, stupid. I thought being hard made me safe." Elijah nodded slowly. "Mom said I have your temper." Reuben smiled sadly. "Then you better learn how to fight it faster than I did." The boy didn't look away, and something passed between them, like trust starting to form a bridge where shame used to live. But not everyone liked Reuben's rise. 2 of Lonnie's old associates, Duke and Marlowe, showed up one night outside the shop, drunk and grinning. "Big man now, huh?" Duke slurred. "Mr. Soap and Soul." Reuben didn't respond. "You forget who used to run this block?" Marlowe asked, stepping closer. "I didn't forget," Reuben said. "I just stopped caring." Duke grabbed a bucket of wax and dumped it onto the pavement. "Oops." Reuben stepped forward. "You boys done?" Duke sneered. "What if we're not?" Troy appeared behind them, holding a socket wrench the size of a hammer. "You are," he said. The men backed off, muttering threats but didn't return. After they left, Troy chuckled. "You know, you might be the only man in this town who inspires both fear and loyalty in equal measure." Reuben shook his head. "I just show up every day. People trust consistency." But that trust was still fragile. A week later, a fire gutted the garage office. No injuries, but Reuben lost supplies, contracts, and the small safe where he kept cash. The sheriff investigated. No arrests. "You think it was Lonnie?" Troy asked. "No," Reuben said. "He's done playing. This felt younger, meaner." Insurance helped, but not much. Reuben rebuilt anyway. What surprised him most was who showed up to help. Gloria, the retired teacher, brought food and folding chairs. Darius from the flea market donated tarps and buckets. Even a city official stopped by and handed him a sealed envelope. "My nephew says you gave him his first real paycheck. That matters." Inside the envelope, a small grant for local entrepreneurs, enough to replace everything that burned. Reuben stood in the ashes of his former life and realized he wasn't alone anymore. That Sunday, he took Elijah fishing. The boy hadn't touched a rod before, but he listened, watched, learned. When he finally reeled in a small bass, Reuben laughed harder than he had in years. "You see," he said, "patience, gentle hands, that's how you catch the good ones." They sat by the water quiet. After a while, Elijah asked, "You ever think about going back, to the old ways?" Reuben thought for a long moment. "Every day," he admitted, "but I think about you more." The boy smiled faintly. Later that evening, as they drove home, Reuben looked over and said, "Someday this business will be yours, if you want it." Elijah's eyes widened. "Really?" "It's called Second Chance Shine, right?" Reuben said. "That's not just about me. That's a promise I want to pass on." The road ahead was long, but for once, Reuben didn't feel like he was chasing redemption. He was building something, brick by brick, clean hand over clean hand. And maybe, just maybe, it would last. The ribbon cutting wasn't fancy. Just a folding table, a banner, and 24 folding chairs under a blistering Mississippi sun. But for Reuben King, it might as well have been the opening of a palace. Second Chance Shine had outgrown the van. With community help, city grants, and months of sweat, Reuben had opened a full-service detailing shop just outside downtown Hattiesburg. 2 bays, 4 employees, a waiting area with a coffee pot that never quite worked right. But it was his. The sheriff came. So did Gloria. So did Darius, and even the pastor from the church whose van Reuben used to scrub on his knees. Elijah stood at his side, holding the scissors with him. "Ready?" Reuben asked. The boy nodded, ready. They cut the ribbon together. The crowd clapped. It felt unreal. Tasha stayed at the edge of the group, arms crossed, but her smile was genuine. Reuben caught her eye, nodded once. She nodded back. After the crowd thinned, Reuben walked through the shop alone, listening to the sound of air compressors and jazz on a static-filled radio. He ran his hand along the polished counter. The place still smelled like paint and new rubber, like beginnings. He stepped into the break room, where Elijah was sketching a logo on a notepad. "What you drawing?" Reuben asked. "New version of the sign," the boy said. "Thought maybe we could add a phoenix, rising from ashes." Reuben stared at it. The bird was rough, clumsy, but powerful. "You know what that bird means?" he asked. "Yeah," Elijah said. "Means something burned down but didn't die." Reuben sat beside him. "That's us. But happy endings are rarely clean, especially not for men like Reuben." The call came late one night. A whisper on the other end. "He's out. Lonnie got hit in a bust, released early. Word is he's looking for someone to blame." Reuben sat in the dark for a long time, staring at the wall. The old Reuben would have armed up, would have hunted before being hunted. But that man was buried. Instead, Reuben called the sheriff. "Just letting you know," he said, "in case anything happens." Edmund sighed. "You expecting something?" "No," Reuben said, "but I've learned to prepare for the storm without inviting it." Days passed, then weeks. Nothing happened. And slowly, the tension that had wrapped Reuben's spine for years started to loosen. Elijah came by after school every day. Tasha, cautiously, began letting him stay longer. One Friday, she came by herself, holding a bag of food. "I figured you weren't eating right," she said. Reuben grinned. "What gave me away?" She looked around the shop. "You made it." He didn't know what to say to that. "I didn't think you would," she added. "Not because you weren't strong, but because most people don't survive being hated by the people who once loved them." "I didn't," Reuben said. "Parts of me are gone, but the part that came back, it's better." They sat outside the shop on an overturned bucket and shared dinner. As the sun dipped low, casting long golden shadows over the pavement, Elijah ran by with a hose, accidentally spraying both of them. Tasha laughed, really laughed for the first time in years. Reuben closed his eyes and let the water wash over his face. It felt like baptism. Later that night, he walked through the empty shop, checking locks, turning off lights. On the door, under the logo Elijah had drawn, a phoenix in silver lines, Reuben added a small sign in black marker. "We don't just clean cars, we clean lives, one layer at a time." He stepped outside, looked at the stars, and for the first time since walking out of prison, he didn't feel like a man trying to be better. He felt like a man who already was.